Hey, it's Amir Borman, and this is the Talent Tango podcast. On this week, we have Devin Schroeder. He actually started his career at Frederickson Partners, and Frederickson Partners, they're an executive search consulting and outplacement firm. He oversees talent, and he has the ability to run executive search over the last 5 years there. Recently, in the last year, he's made the transition to the U.S. talent acquisition side at Funding Circle. Funding Circle is a publicly traded fintech company that helps small businesses get loans. They are a London-based company with offices in London, Berlin, Amsterdam, Denver, New York, and San Francisco. God, you guys are everywhere. That's amazing. Thanks for being on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. So as we kind of talked about, I always like to get a little bit of origin story, kind of how you got into the industry, a little bit of get to know you, and then we'll jump into it.
Yeah, sure. So my origin story is I always tell people this. I went to a conference once about 5 years ago, and the speaker said, I want everybody, it was an HR conference. He said, I want everybody who thought they were going to start their career in HR to raise their hand. And it was about a room of about 400 or so people. And I'm pretty certain about 2% of the audience raised their hand thinking they were going to have a career in HR. And then he said, who just happened into HR? And then the other 99% of the audience raised their hand. I fell into the exact same category. I was going to grad school. I graduated college right around when the economy went through the economic downturn. And I just was not sure what I wanted to do or where I wanted my life and career to go. I have a major love and passion for the sports world, and I always thought it would be really cool to work in sports. I didn't realize how incredibly difficult that career is. And so what happened for me was I found a really amazing master's program at the University of San Francisco that did sport management. So I got to work for the San Francisco Giants when they won the World Series in 2012. I worked for the Oakland Raiders. I worked for the Sacramento River Cats. I did some stuff for UC Berkeley, some really amazing things.
Wow.
But I was falling out of love with sports because you see the behind the scenes of everything. You see how difficult it is. And it just wasn't resonating with me in the way that I was hoping it would. But little did I know that I would be asked to do something during that program that would really alter the trajectory of where my life and my career would go. The head of our program asked me if I'd like to go to a graduate fair and have a table to promote the master's program. And I was like, yeah, sure. So I went and did it, and I just totally fell in love with it. I got to talk to students about the program. And even though I didn't move forward in sports, I mean, there were some amazing, amazing opportunities that people could have. And the alumni through this program is absolutely spectacular. And so what I got to do was I got to really sell them on it. And I saw how excited they got about it. And it really resonated with me. And then I was getting close to graduating, still wasn't sure what I wanted to do and where I needed my career to go. And then my wife was on LinkedIn, and she rarely goes on LinkedIn, and she saw this job posting for Frederickson Partners, and she passed this along to me and said, you should look into this. And I looked at it and I was like, an executive recruiter? It's like, what is an executive recruiter? And so I applied, and the CEO really liked me. We hit it off, and she saw something in me and she hired me. And then 5 years into that job, I was helping to run our whole executive search practice and was overseeing a fairly decently sized team. And then here I am at Funding Circle running the USTA function. That's my origin story.
Dude, that's cool. Yeah. Like, I think everyone would be like, I mean, at least I do. I mean, I don't know about everyone, but I'm looking at going, that'd have been really cool to, start off in the sports world. I guess you don't think about it, but once you see how something's baked and made, it's a lot different than kind of the end product. Yeah. Yeah. I think, I have a couple of friends who in LA, do some movie production stuff, and they're far less interested in when movies come out because they're like, you don't understand, it's not. And when you said that, I was like, wow, that just related so much to what they said. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, you get to do some really amazing things and you get to meet some really cool people and stuff.
Yeah,
But at the end of the day, it's really fun and really cool, but it just didn't fit for what I felt like where my career needed to go and what I was really ultimately meant to be doing.
sure. Well, I mean, I think actually what's really interesting from that is you were able to identify that early on. I mean, you could have easily said, I want to stick it out for a couple of years and then made a transition, but you invested what you had to and you made the move and you got into executive search, retained search. Like, I'm just curious, and we'll come back to it again, but I'm just curious before I forget, like, what was day one like for you? Like, you got
Oh my
there, day
gosh.
one, you just went from the sports world to you're doing that HR. It went from one of the most glamorous areas of the world where it's, sports and entertainment to recruitment. Like, what was day one
Yeah,
like?
it was a whirlwind. I mean, I had to when we would onboard new employees and when I had been there for a long enough period of time and I was in charge of doing that, I would really say to them that this is like learning a new language. You have to learn the terminology, the trends, what to say, how to present yourself, because you're dealing with CEOs of some really well-known companies or founders of these really hot startups that are just about to take off, and you need to be able to talk to them and come across like you're the expert, because that's why they've hired you, because they believe you can tap into something that they can't. And but that first day I came in and I just thought, what in the world did I get myself into? Like I just was so I was just everything was new. Everything was new. It was like learning to, I guess, walk again or something like that. And but I just remember I just said, I'm going to soak this in and I'm going to read as much as I can. Luckily, the company had some really good people who had been there for a long period of time. Our old head of business operations, her name was Michelle. She did an amazing job. She was like a diligent note taker. And so there was just as much as you can imagine around anything I could have a question about, she had documented. And then my manager, her name's Mathilde. Mathilde was just so open and made me feel comfortable. And then Valerie, the CEO, just she really believed in me, and so I just felt comfortable enough to dive into it. But that first day was a lot.
Oh, there you go. And then several years later, you make the transition to internal. What was that first day like? Because obviously you knew recruiting, but now you're going internal. You got skin in the game.
I had no idea how different it was going to be leading up to it. I made some really good contacts with people along the way who worked internally. And when I made the decision that I was going to leave and go in-house, I reached out to some of them just to talk about it. And I remember one woman she was a client of ours who really got to like quite a bit. She said to me, she said, Devin, it's a whole other animal, but you're going to really love it. And you're never going to want to go back to doing the external stuff again, because you can really see the impact that you're going to have on everything. I came in and we were going through such an exciting and interesting time at Funding Circle. And the role that I got to come in and play was really fantastic. It was a great opportunity for me. But I just was the first day, week, month, honestly, first few months for me were a ton of learning and just trying to figure out what to do. And I had to get used to moving a lot faster. That was the part that I had the hardest time with. And that's what people told me. They said, everything moves at rapid speed there. And I had to get used to just being comfortable, being uncomfortable for a long period of time.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, we'll come back. We'll come back to internal, external. I think we have a couple of things I wanted to chat with you first.
Sure.
So I know you made the move. What experience, like, what did you take with you going into the job? So you have 5 years as a recruiter, that's a pretty long time as an external recruiter. That's a pretty good accolade. And then one company that is too. So taking that, going internal, what was your game plan and how you were going to affect, you know, your first, 60 days, 90 days, and you're the sole, are you the sole on the ground person in the US, or do you have
No.
a team
So
there?
there's a small team here in San Francisco, and we have some really fantastic people here in San Francisco. We've got this tech recruiter who was described to me in my interview as this Jedi of a recruiter who's been doing this for years. He's worked at some of the best companies in Silicon Valley. I've learned a ton from being around him. We had some other really strong people as well, but we also had some junior people too. But one of the things that I did was I had to build our Denver team out from scratch. Denver is our North American operations hub, and we didn't have anything on the ground there. So that was really important that I step in and do that. So the first hire I made there was really, really important. But what I needed to do when I first joined was I just needed to understand the business. I needed to understand what was recruiting doing well and what did recruiting need to do better to get funding circle to the next stage of where they were seeing themselves going. And it might sound boring, but it was just I sat down with people and I talked to them. But the thing that I did that I took from my executive search days was I got to know people on a human level as well as on a work level. So when I sat down with them, it was tell me about yourself. I just want to get to know you because we're going to have to work together on a really regular basis. And I want there to be a level of comfort there. So you feel like you can talk with me about the stuff that's really keeping you up at night rather than just saying, Devin, I need to get this role filled and this is what we're looking for. Because in my mind, that only gets you so far. Recruiting and talent, and people always say the war on talent, which I don't really necessarily agree with. I went to a conference and I heard somebody say the fight for fit. And I really liked that because culture is key on everything and making sure that the people you hire reflect the culture and they know what they're getting into. So I really wanted to get to know the people who I was going to be hiring for. And that really helped, in my opinion. And that was how I approached those first handful of months.
Yeah, and I agree. What's interesting about the fit statement is I always look at it and go, a different person, a different organization is going to operate differently,
Yeah.
and one person doesn't fit one organization for whatever reason might excel in another, and it's just making sure there's tangible and intangibles, and making sure those all kind of vibe together. I think that's really where I think all this comes together, and that's the value add to kind of be able to help that process along. Um, so you mentioned obviously you guys are the company itself is UK based, correct?
Yes.
Do you guys, when it comes to recruiting, is there much influence from the home office back in the UK, or do you guys run operations, as per US practices, or is there any influence in terms of UK procedures?
Yeah, it's a combination of both. And I'll say that the recruiting function here is really fantastic. Our head of talent acquisition in London is amazing. She is able to really come up with a vision, but then she also knows that the US is different than London. It's different than Germany. It's different than the Netherlands. Denver is different than San Francisco. And so she has said to me from the beginning, Devin, this is yours. Make it your own and figure it out. I'm here to help you. And we have some really good process in place. They've built some stuff out that I've been able to leverage. They've put this thing together called hiring the FC way. So hiring the funding circle way. It's this amazing values-based interview guideline that everybody has to go through. Anybody who interviews for us has to go through a training on this so they understand it. And it's rolled out globally. And so I was lucky enough to have something like that, but it's still up to me to figure out how we're going to do it. And so a lot of the direction comes from the UK, but the day to day and the US vision comes through my eyes, and then how my team and I want to take a look at it and put it together.
Interesting. So you mentioned the values based component there, the feedback. How much metrics are you guys and I'm just curious, side question. How much metrics are you capturing around that, and kind of are you guys building analytics, or is it just more, just capturing information? Is there any feedback loop incorporated into that?
Yeah, there is. Our analytics function is still, I'd say it's still more in its younger stages. We do have a really strong TA analyst here, and we really like to promote internally. And so she started off as a technical sourcer and did that sort of stuff. But she had a real passion for the analytics of everything. So she's been building out dashboards, and we take a look at different metrics. I would say we haven't been able to get quite to the phase yet where we can really use it quite as much as an influencer, but we are really starting to gather more and more data, and we are using pieces to influence. But it's more around some different areas rather than some of the interviewing and those types of areas.
Interesting. Yeah, that's actually, I mean, for a company your size, I think having a devoted analyst for talent, that's actually pretty good.
It's great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was talking to the someone at director of talent at Splunk, and at a company that size, they're obviously hiring people, but I don't see many. Yeah, on a smaller scale. So that's really cool. You guys have that in place.
Well, we also have a senior org effectiveness manager, and she really looks at what is working within the business. And she's super analytical, and the work that she's doing ties into a lot of the TA analytics that we're doing. And she's doing broader people team analytics. But the two of them work really closely together to make sure that they're identifying trends, and those are getting a funnel back up through the business, and then that's influencing decisions that are needing to be made.
Interesting. How often? I mean, you're actually at the satellite office in this case. So I talk to people where it's the reverse, the UK or a foreign country. How often are you, or how do you do your one-on-ones? Is it done internally, locally? Is it back with somebody in the UK?
So I have a one-on-one with my manager every week. It's an hour Zoom interview. I mean, we use Slack like crazy. It's something that we're constantly utilizing. So we use that for ongoing communication needs. But I have one-on-ones with members of the people team, either weekly or bi-weekly, different member, like people partners, those people as well, and different hiring managers and people like that, to make sure that we're able to stay on top of what's going on. But yeah, that's mainly where it's coming from.
Did you see any difference in your workflow? Because obviously, if you're, with the retained search firm, it was a smaller company. Everyone, I'm assuming, was fairly local, accessible. Any adjustment to your workflow, or is it pretty much status quo?
No, I definitely had to adjust. So towards the end of my time at Frederickson, we started to hire some more remote employees, just because it was proving to be a potentially more effective avenue that we wanted to go down. So I started to get used to dealing with people who weren't in the office. But at the moment, my Denver team is completely remote, or not in the same office as me. And so I have to make sure that I am trying to be as visible as possible to them and not be annoying, obviously, in the way that I'm doing it. And so there's a fine line that you have to walk with that. But at the same token, I try to make sure that I interact with them the same way I would interact with the people with them if they were here with me on a daily basis.
Gotcha. Makes sense. So coming from retained search, you were talking about the pace being faster internal. What did you notice in terms of when it came to offers? Like, obviously you were negotiating offers as an external person. You had vested interest in a different way versus being an internal person. You still have skin in the game, but how do the two differ when it comes to negotiating an offer?
That's a good question. Internally, I'm really focusing more on selling them at why what they're about to embark on with us is going to help their career and what they'll get here on a day-to-day basis. Whereas externally, I was focusing more on why exactly they should take this next step in their career. Does that make sense? This was internally. You're filling so many roles, and you need to be looking at what does the team need at this point in time, and how is this person going to influence it for the future. So you really focus a lot on that when you're selling the role to the individual. When it was external, we were just hiring one role. And so you were talking much broader in a lot of ways. And there's less impact that I would obviously see because I wasn't there working with them afterwards. But this, I need to make sure that every hire that I make is going to fit into the umbrella of what Funding Circle is trying to do. Whereas externally, it just had a different look and feel to it.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I've asked that question before, and I think obviously we're an external agency. The one thing that I always kind of go back. I actually came through the technology side. I mean, I was an engineer, diverted my career into recruiting, but I always look at it and go, when you're internal, you're privy to the actual business problem being solved. You actually
Yeah,
understand what that conversation is. You have a seat in the meeting room. You're hearing it firsthand. I think when you get to the external, you're getting the Cliff Notes version of what
yes,
problem solve, and it's very
yeah.
difficult to really help sell the value of joining and understanding the impact somebody can make, because I think you just have less information to work with. I think that to me has been what I've been noticing in my two internal external roles.
I agree with you. And one thing that hit on something when you were talking about that, for me, I know what's going on here. And so I can really go to a person and say, hey, what you're going to do is going to impact us and I can just say the checklist of all the things that we believe this role is going to have impact on. Whereas when I was external, you only get bits and pieces. And I think we did a really good job of being able to figure out what was going on with the company. When we would do our kickoff meetings, we called them, where we'd go on site and we'd meet with everybody on the interview panel. And we wouldn't prepare questions all the time for those people, except for the hiring manager, because we wanted to get specific things. But we would just say, say that a GC comes in, just say, how do you envision partnering with this role, and what are you struggling with right now? And you can gain so much information from that, but you don't really know what that person is struggling with on a day-to-day basis. That's going to be up to the person that we eventually hire to then start figuring that stuff out.
Yeah, I think that's well articulated. I think that's what I see. And I think in my mind, I would love to see a world, and I know RPOs go in and they embed themselves, and I know retained search gets a little bit more access, and contingent is really the furthest away. But I think there's so much more value partnership bonding that's going to help both sides provide business value, that I think we're still not quite there yet in the market. I don't know.
I completely agree with you. And that was one of the things I loved about my last job that I've tried to bring into Funding Circle, is that it's not us versus them. It's not the agency versus the company, or the recruiter versus the business. You're all working together because you believe that the hire you're going to make is going to get the business from A to B to the end of the alphabet. And if you really believe in talent and the value talent brings, then you can create some amazing companies. I mean, you just look at the companies that are renowned for the talent that they have, and they cracked that nut. They knew that that was important, and they succeeded because of that. And the companies that don't necessarily believe in that quite as much, or maybe they just haven't understood it, or they haven't seen what good looks like, I think that they will have a harder time to finding that success, or that secret sauce, or whatever you want to coin it as.
Absolutely. No, I 100%. We believe in the same things there. Um, to kind of pivot into another topic, I want to make sure cognizant of our time. I know you touched on employment branding before we get on. And I think one thing that struck me was interesting, and I kind of let you talk about it a little bit, is how mission driven Funding Circle is, and I thought that'd be a good kind of starting point.
Yeah, I was really intentional around where I wanted to go. I really wanted to go to a company that I just resonated with. I come from a family of small business owners. My Both my parents are self-employed. My sister recently just started a flower business. I'll give her a plug. It's called Flowers by Erin. She runs it out of her garage at the moment, but it's
Nice.
amazing. She's got a great eye for got a great eye for that. Yeah,
Good for her.
I agree. I mean, she's got three kids and she's running this, and it's actually gotten like super successful. She had to recruit my wife to come in and help her get the business off the ground because it was going so quickly.
That's awesome.
But like my father-in-law owns his own small business. He's run it for gosh, going on 30 plus years now. So I really believe in small businesses. I like to shop at small businesses. I really do believe that they're the backbone of the economy. And without them, you just lose a little bit of like the soul of America in a way, to sound kind of, pining, I guess, but I really do believe that. And Funding Circle to me, it allows people to have a chance. And if they are, rejected by a bank, I mean, big banks don't really care about small businesses because it's not enough of a profit gain for them. And so that's where somebody like us can come in and really make a difference and an impact in the people in our borrowers. And I love
That's fantastic. If it comes to, my wife knows, if it comes to eating out, I want to eat at a local establishment. I I do not go
that.
to many chains. I try to avoid them. I just like supporting the local, whoever it is has a restaurant or whatever activity, because I think, like you, I mean, this person is putting his IP, his heart and soul into just his livelihood, and I got to support that. So I actually, when I saw you're coming on, I was like, I like the story. I was like, that's really cool because it really does resonate. So when you were actually joining, when you mentioned to make a difference, I mean, you must have different options. Was mission like the clear driver? Like, did you look at the growth? Because obviously, Funding Circle is really on a great trajectory. Like, how were you evaluating joining them maybe versus somebody else? Because I know that's hitting it right in terms of a startup is really tricky. Like, what were the drivers for you?
What the company did was the first driver for me. I also I I really hit I really hit it off with my manager. I just connected with her instantly. She just has this energy. I always joke with her. I'll just say, Layla, if you want me to run through the wall, I'll run through the wall because you inspire me to run through the wall. You know what I mean? And I love that. I just connected with her. The people I interviewed with, they just impressed me too. I just thought that they were smart, and down to earth too. I was a little hesitant going into a financial organization. I mean, you hear these horror stories of finance companies and it just being cutthroat, or a boys club, or whatever you want to call it. And so I was really, I had my antennas up on that. And I have been every single day. That is not the case here. Everybody is so down to earth and easy to talk to and easy to work with and team oriented. And that comes from our CEO. He's has no ego. He'll chat with you about whatever you want to talk about. Our managing director, who oversees our US business, I call him the mayor because he just walks around the office talking to literally everybody, laughing with people. And so that was huge for me, getting to just see what those people were like. Um, and the role was really appealing. I'm not going to lie. I thought it would be, I thought I could do some cool stuff with it too.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I like it. I mean, so when you're now looking back at, I know you kind of, the company came from was more boutique, Funding Circle, larger entity. and you're joining and you've got to assimilate to maybe more, I don't know, different processes. How did you assimilate to having to kind of, flip going, all right, that was the external processes for a 40-person company, and now I need to kind of adapt to these processes because obviously there's a lot more just I's to dot when you're internal in this type of role.
Yeah. Yeah, I had to learn like what was the process. The other piece too is that being a financial institution, we're a highly regulated environment.
Yep.
And so everything we do is going to take a little bit more time. But what I needed to make sure that I understood was just why things needed to happen. And I needed to just stick to process. So even if that meant that I had to go to a hiring manager who was just saying, like, why can't we get this done? I'd just be like, well, think of it this way. We either do it right the first time or we're going to screw up and not do it right. And we have to then backtrack, or we're going to make it air, or the person you think you're going to be able to hire isn't actually going to be a viable person. So I actually didn't have as difficult of a time assimilating into that as I thought I would, probably because the function had some good bones and good parameters. And then what I've been able to do is here in the US, really just start figuring it out. How do we need to do it here to make it its own and make it consistent and make it scalable as well?
Nice. The question that's on my mind is: do you get to go to the UK to visit the home office very often, or does that not happen?
No, actually, I've gotten to go once. I went last month, which was, I loved it. It was so fun. Been to London once before, but just as a tourist, it was really fun to get to go over there and work. And the team was just, I mean, it was great. They've got this great energy, and they're super easy to get along with, and funny, and but it was really cool to get to go over there. Yeah.
Did you see any interesting, I guess, differences with their recruitment approach versus how we approach candidates? Especially, I mean, you're recruiting in more the West Denver, California.
Yeah, yeah. There is a difference in the way that they go about things there. I think that there is a level of, I don't want this to come off in a negative way because I don't mean it that way, but there's a casualness in some way to them that I really liked. I'm really casual in the way that I approach stuff, and I know Silicon Valley is also very casual as well. But I think that when it comes to jobs and talking about compensation and all of those things, it's just done differently over there. Whereas here we have to keep things slightly bit more closer to the vest and do things a little bit differently from that perspective. But they also have a much bigger team over there, and so I think that the level of just familiarity that they have around how people are doing everything and things of that nature was something that I noticed, and something I'm trying to infuse more over here.
Nice, I like that. Yeah, I think I have a few friends who do recruiting in England, and it seems they're very much more phone based than we are sometimes here. I think like they're very comfortable just the phone versus I think here we're like, well, we'll try almost every other communication because
Yeah.
we also have do not call lists and a lot of different stuff to deal with.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, totally.
so we have other issues, but so I mentioned that I had a few questions that we go through, and I just want to make sure we had enough time to get through those. So
Sure.
you've had a really, I mean, interest. You just recently came over, extensive career in an executive retained search HR space. What would you tell someone starting out, or if you had any, what would you tell a younger you? Any advice, anything that you've learned that you're like you wish you knew when you'd first started?
Well, the I was lucky when I worked at Frederickson to be able to. We hired younger people with not a lot of experience, little to no experience, and so I really got to just talk with them about how they wanted what they wanted their career story to start looking like. And I there's a level, especially when you're doing executive, that people don't need to be scared about being the expert in the room. Like I said, I think I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that you're hired because you are the expert, and you can't be afraid of that. If you really are, if you know that you can talk about two or three things really well, let's talk about that. And let's get you really fluent in that part of that language. I think the other thing that I would have told myself was just, you know, take some chances, jump into some things that you might not feel totally comfortable with. My favorite teacher in grad school, his first thing was just get comfortable being uncomfortable. And in recruiting, you are very uncomfortable quite regularly because you're talking about people's careers, you're talking about money, you're talking about what needs to happen from a business perspective, and it's a lot to take in. But I really would just embrace that a bit more wholeheartedly and not be afraid of the unknown quite as much as I used to be. And so that's something that I definitely would have told younger people. And the other thing too is know how to tell your story, know how to sell yourself. That is something that people don't know how to do, in my opinion. And I worked with some employees here on how to sell what they've done here and how to talk about it. And people, they downgrade what they've done. They just think like, oh, I've only worked here for 2 years, and or I've only done this. And it's just like, well, let's actually backtrack and let's look 30,000 foot overview. Look what how you did impacted the business. And if you weren't here to do that, would it have happened? And then they start to actually think about what they've done. It's like that's what you need to take into any interview that you ever go into, or when you're asking for a promotion or something like that. You need to be able to come in and just own yourself and the work that you've done and really be comfortable and confident in telling that story. That is my thing that I think is invaluable and people don't do enough of.
That's actually fantastic. I haven't had somebody articulate it that way, and I think it actually makes a lot of sense because I do. I think when you look on it, you do see a lot of people they don't know how to value their skill set appropriately, and that is a big issue. I think very interesting.
Yeah, it's your brand. You need to brand yourself, and you get to pick how you brand yourself.
Yeah,
And I love that.
yeah. We actually put out a podcast a couple days ago where we talked about the resume is content and not thinking about it as a document, but it's content like you would put out on Instagram or Facebook. It's representing who you are. So people take a lot more effort in terms of taking a selfie sometimes than they do
Yeah.
the resume, and it's like it's
Yeah.
content though. Too
Yeah.
funny. The other question I mentioned, it's a selfish area that I like to know, and you touched on yours, and I still think it's a good one. But I love productivity hacks. I just like to know how people work, how they manage their day, how they go about keeping the chaos organized. So what is it that lets you stay efficient?
Well, I mean, the one that is tried and true for me, and it's just true to the way I learn, is that whenever I see that I'm getting off track with things, or I'm forgetting something, or I'm not doing something as efficiently, it's because I'm trying to keep everything up in my brain rather than out on a piece of paper. I have a notebook that I take everywhere with me. My wife got it for me for, I think, a birthday or just a gift or something like that. And so that comes with me to every meeting. And I try to write things down, and then I put a box next to it. And then if I've done it, I check it off. If I haven't done it, it stays there. And then I try to go through on a daily basis and look through and be like, what did I check off and what did I not check? And I'm able to then see what needs to happen. And then I can also look at the things that are unchecked and really start to think, is this a priority that I need to get done now? Or is it something that's a little bit longer term? And so every day I have a thing on my calendar, it just says end of day recap. And I try to go through and I just think about the day that I just finished, and then thinking about the next day and what do I need to do. Now, I'll be honest with you, it's not, I'm still getting better at it. But I really see the value in being able to do that. That is the easiest thing for me. It's like I said, I think it's not anything sexy and exciting, but it's the tried and true way that works best for me.
Hey, I literally have I have a journal has time slots and just to-do lists on the right, and I literally do the same thing. End of my day before I leave to go home, I take about 5 to 10 minutes and I flip through it and I'm like, what have I missed? Why is it there? And I use that 5 10 minutes just like you. I really want to understand if something's been carrying over. Why did I think it was important, and should I let
Yeah,
it go? So to me,
yeah,
that's really important because I'm looking at it going, it's been there for like 6 days and I keep carrying it over. What made it important? But if it was that important, why is it still like hanging out? So is it really important? And should I cross it off and go, all right, well, whatever, I don't need this anymore. So
yeah, yeah. The other thing I've started doing is just for productivity's sake is before any meeting or one-on-one or anything like that, I block time off usually the day before or the morning of to just gather my thoughts around what I'm going to do and what I'm going to say. And I say this tongue in cheek, but man, I'm amazed at how much better those meetings go by being prepared. Who would have thought? But but I really find that just being prepared and knowing what I want to do and what I want to cover and what I need to get done makes makes my day a whole lot easier to navigate.
You know what? Organization preparedness are two great
Yeah.
trademarks of staying productive. So I would have knocked those two. I had something pop in my head. I was curious. I was going to ask you because you work internal, you work external. Do you think of recruiting? Because I have my own thoughts, but I want to hear what you say. Is recruiting sales? Like, are recruiters salespeople to you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. You're selling an opportunity to people, and people are very hard to sell stuff to, and they need to be convinced. I had a conversation with my father-in-law on Monday or Tuesday, and we were talking actually in this same ballpark about this. And I was saying to him, and he fully admitted, he said, he's like, I haven't. He has a really small company, and the people that have all worked there have worked there forever. He's like, I haven't interviewed anybody in years. And I said, because I was talking to him about it's the interviewer's job to sell the interviewee. And he was like, yeah, but they're applying to the job. And I'm like, that doesn't matter. That person, especially in Silicon Valley and now even in, areas, Denver, Austin, Seattle, I mean, you name it, there's all of these tech hubs popping up. They could walk out the door and go interview at 100 other places for the same job. And you need to sell them on why they should come to Funding Circle or whatever company. And you need to give them something to get excited about. And so that's where one of the things we're trying to do more of is sell the mission of Funding Circle and what it's doing and why that should tip the scales in our favor. And I love getting to talk about that because I truly believe that this is sales. It's just not your prototypical sales world. It's just, in my opinion, just as complicated, and it's very multifaceted at the same time too.
Yeah, I think it's selling somebody a car. I think is one thing. Selling somebody a house is even, but their day to day where they invest their time, where they spend more time than any other thing. That's you're basically selling them on spending your time doing this at this particular area with these values.
Yeah.
That's what you should do, and that's a big thing I think for people to decide on. So I
Yeah.
that's interesting take. Man, I appreciate it. Like I mentioned, time goes by in podcast
Yeah,
time, and
it did.
and I told you we want to get through everything, and I kind
Yeah.
of I think we had a great conversation. I really appreciate it. I know you had some social links for us to share. Are you okay with us posting those if somebody wants to reach out? Any questions about your background or Funding Circle?
Yeah, totally. Go for it.
Awesome, man. So again, thank you very much for being on. And anyone who's listening to the podcast, check out Devin's background. Very interesting. Check out Funding Circle. I think you guys would find what they're doing really appealing if you're out on the market, because I actually really like what they do. And then also leave some feedback. I really want to know, what other questions, if we should be tweaking stuff. I'm always big on feedback to constructive. Otherwise, let me know. We want to improve the reach of the podcast. And until we come back again next week, thanks.